You know, it's one thing if the mainstream media chooses not to cover the news at Standing Rock, but it's quite another to misinform the public, to publish articles with sensationalist titles lacking any evidence, where your only investigation deals with listening to Sheriff Kyle Kirchmeier, who's a windbag if there ever was one. Let's talk about last Monday, October 10th article in the New York Times titled, quote, "Ranchers Tote Guns as Tribes Dig In for Long Pipeline Battle," end quote. Now, you know what's crazy is that this is a 2-page article with only 3 sentences on point. One of the sentences only has 4 words. Okay, this is crazy. This is propaganda if there ever was. Okay, so the first line of the article, location, Cannonball, North Dakota, quote, "Ranchers are arming themselves before they climb onto tractors or see to their livestock," end quote. Okay, so think about that for a second. Have water protectors stolen any cattle? Have they messed with any cattle? Have they stolen tractors? Have they gone onto people's homes and stolen cars or mugged or broken into homes, stolen furniture, TVs, any of that stuff? Is there any looting taking place at Standing Rock? I mean, to me, it's crazy because you've got, let's put everything into context. You've got National Guard, armed. You've got county police, armed. Contracted security, armed. And now you're going to have armed ranchers. Okay? The only group that's not armed are the water protectors. Why? Because they are peaceful, nonviolent water protectors. Progressives protecting water, and elders praying and honoring sacred burial grounds. So you have 4 different groups answering to 4 different people. In the ranchers' case, they don't answer to anyone. It's a free-for-all. And they're all armed to the teeth. Against what? Now, this article doesn't provide any evidence as to why ranchers should be arming themselves. Except, of course, for Sheriff Kyle Kirchmeier's statement, which we'll get to. Now, we go several paragraphs down to the second of the 3 pertinent lines, and that sentence reads, quote, "Ranchers are becoming edgy," end quote. A 4-word sentence that starts a paragraph way down into the article. Let's read the other sentences in the paragraph. There aren't many. I think there's 1 or 2. So, quote, "Ranchers are becoming edgy. Sheriff's deputies worried about being identified at protests have taken off their name tags, and some say they have been followed home. Local officials here are increasingly exasperated because Washington has declined or ignored their requests, they say, for emergency funds and federal law enforcement officers," end quote. Okay, let's address the absurdity, okay? The absurdity of that claim. Now, if you're a police officer, you've got cameras that record to the front, to the back, to the sides. Okay? Now, if an officer was followed home, the officer would have footage of the car following him. Even if the officer didn't have the footage, if an officer is followed, the officer can stop the car, go back, call for reinforcements, and arrest the person. Who has been arrested for following a cop home? Okay, that would be like a harassment charge. That would be interfering with an investigation, maybe a disorderly conduct, whatever. It would be something. Because you can't follow cops to their house. You can't follow anyone to their house. You could rob them. You could hurt them. You could steal from them. Who knows what? But if there's no police reports, if there's no evidence, then all it is hyperbole. All it is hearsay. All it is, quite possibly, could be a fabrication. Did the New York Times do its due diligence? Did they investigate? Or did they just go off what the cop said? And why are ranchers becoming edgy? Again, do we have proof? Do we have stolen tractors, killed cattle, stolen cattle, homes broken into, cars stolen? Do we have any of that? Why are the ranchers edgy? Why are they arming themselves before they get on their tractors? Why is the New York Times running this story if there's no evidence? But we're going to get to the evidence. We're going to get to the third pertinent line of the story, of a 2-page story. This is almost at the end. Quote, Sheriff Kirchmeier says, now, see, this is again the kind of mediocre, irresponsible journalism that the newspaper that allegedly only prints the news it's fit to print is doing. Sheriff Kirchmeier says demonstrators have charged onto private property and attacked pipeline contractors. Demonstrators say security guards for the pipeline unleashed guard dogs on them during a confrontation. Okay. So what you have is Sheriff Kirchmeier, the man that accuses water protectors and elders of riots for peacefully assembling and praying, telling the New York Times that demonstrators have charged on the private property and they have attacked pipeline contractors. Now, understand the way that most Americans think. If you have an article about private property owners having to arm themselves and private property owners that are edgy and a police officer, a sheriff no less, painting a picture of water protectors as trespassers and as basically thugs that are attacking pipeline workers. And then, of course, you add that the water protectors claim the security attacked them. Who is the American public more likely to believe? The sheriff or the people that have the ranchers so edgy and so scared that they have to arm themselves just to go and see their cattle on their own property? And there's no evidence. There's no tickets. There's no complaints. There's no pictures. There's no injured pipeline workers. None of it. None of it. But now you have ranchers arming themselves. So you have armed ranchers, armed National Guard, armed cops, armed security, unarmed water protectors, unarmed elders, and the American public totally in the dark.